All right, you're welcome on board once again now. So now in this class, we're going to be talking about grid, okay, using grid in Tailwind CSS. And just like Flexbox, now Tailwind allows to use grid, okay. So basically you'll see that there's a great similarity between grid and Flexbox, okay, and almost all the a lot of properties are kind of similar, okay, to what you've already known while using Flexbox. And as usual, the container that hold all the items are called the grid container, while the items inside are called the grid items. So quickly now we'll just jump into here now. So if we're gonna work with grid now, definitely we're gonna call this grid, okay. And then grid kind of simplified, can just define how many columns, how many rows, and blah blah blah, and things like that. So it just kind of it's a straightforward approach to actually defining the overall layouts, okay, of your work. So whatever it, if you understand grid very well, you should be able to structure each of these layouts properly, okay, without having any kind of headache, okay. So now what we're gonna do, so right here now, just call this grid now, and then we go ahead and then define how many columns we want. Just say grid columns, and then let's say we want 3 columns, and that's all. So let's just give this a kind of background first, and so that we can see what we're doing. And then we want some spacing in Flexbox. We talk about gap, okay, so we could also apply gap here as well, right? So now for the children, now we're going to do the same thing here. We're going to have, excuse me, div here, and then we'll have a class name, okay, that's let's say, let's give this bg blue 500, and then let's say text white text here, and then I'm gonna say px8, that's horizontal padding, and then vertical padding. So let's make the 6th, and then we'll just go ahead and then duplicate this guy now. Let's just call this item 1, and then we're gonna duplicate this guy now into 9 places so that we could see how it works. All right, so this is gonna be item 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9. So let's sketch it out, this last guy here for the now. All right, so I'm gonna save this now. Now we have 3 columns there. If we go over here now, you see that we have 3 columns. Now you could see we could reduce, and everything is still cool there. So if we want to, we could make this to be 2 columns, okay. So automatically become 2 columns now, you see, no matter where we are, we have 2 columns. So it depends. So you see, grid just kind of make things easy in that you can just define what you want, okay. But you know, I think I'm just going to be talking about responsiveness right from here, okay. Now let's take, for instance, now we want it to be 1 column right from the very start now. So I'm just going to say grid column 1. So everything is going to be 1 column now, but I want at certain breakpoint now, when it's from small breakpoint, it's going to be let me say 2. Now I'm just going to define that breakpoint now as let me say small. Then I'll define what I want, grid columns, let's say from small breakpoint now I want it to be 2. From medium breakpoint now I want it to be let's say 4. Okay, so you just define how you want it now. So this is how we do responsive design in Tailwind. Now it's just a kind of straightforward approach now. So you see now it's 2 now, so once it's come, it's become 4. So in Tailwind, responsiveness is just like a piece of cake here, okay. So you just define the breakpoints and what exactly you want to see, okay. So you see 1 column, once you expand it now, it's adjust now. So it's as simple as that, achieving responsive design here in Tailwind CSS, okay. Now just as we have the number of columns, now we can also define number of rows as well. So let me just use only one breakpoint for the now. 2. Okay. All right, now I can define how many rows I want. Now, although the rows will enter automatically, number of rows will enter automatically based on how many items you could fill up the screen. Okay, but then we can actually define the rows. Grid rows. I can say, okay, I want just 2 rows. If I define 2 rows now, it is now called explicit grid or explicit rows. Okay, but the rest of them that are not accounted for now are referred to as implicit. Okay, so most of the time, so sometimes you will just define it like this now. Okay, now you might not really see the difference here now, but though we have 2 rows there. Okay, let me add a height to the entire grid container. I'm going to add a height, but the height I want to add now, I don't want to define a fixed height now. I'm just going to allow the height to take up the entire screen. So I'm going to say height screen to take up the entire screen. All right, now, so when we allow the height to take up the entire screen, now you see this first 2 now that will define the first 2 rows now that we explicitly define. Now you could see the size now is different from this one. Now we are not accounting for this one. So if we make the grid rows now, we have 3 known sizes like this now, so the rest one will just take up the space of whatever content they have there. So you see how it works now. So we could go ahead and then define the main number of rows that we actually need. So okay, so as we go, you feel the need for defining number of rows, number of columns, and all of that. Okay, so let's take for okay, I think for now let me just get rid of this one first. Now let me get rid of the rows first. Okay, so let everything just flow like that now. Okay, it's taking up the entire screen now because of this screen here that we have there. Now when working with grid, all the functions, the gap, margin, padding, justify content, align items, they all work almost the same way, just as you have in your Flexbox. Okay, so I'm going to remove this screen here first now, so that I have, excuse me. Okay, so that's how I'm left with this guy like this now. Let's see, I think I'm going to have, let me put this grid. Now most of the properties you might not really see their effect now. Okay, let's go ahead and then put this entire grid inside maybe another box. Okay, let's see. Grid, this. Hold on, let's add a width again here. Width of let's say 500 pixels. Okay, all right, so now we have this 500 pixel now to demonstrate some of those properties we knew in Flexbox. Now what I'm going to do now, because if I have you see this justify content now can only work in the parent div that holds what we want to justify. Okay, for instance, now it's this entire object we want to justify. So if we apply justify content here, let's say justify end or justify center here, it's not going to work. Okay, so what we're going to do now is to we already have this one here, okay, as our main stuff now. So I'm going to cut this out now and put it in another div now. Div, put it here. So this outer div now is what I'm going to give that class name, and I'm going to say, I'm going to make it grid. Then I'm going to say justify end. So if I use justify end now, so you can see the things now flowing to the end now. So now I can apply all of those justify to the outer layer div now. Okay, so now I can use justify center. Okay, so all of this justify stuff now that we have here can work on the outer layer div. Okay, so you can see it now. while the inner div here is going to define the columns now of my work now. So that's how it works. We also have another one now, content start, content end, and the rest of it now. So let's come over here, and then for this outer one, this one now talks about the horizontal alignment. Now here I can now have let's say contents end. Let's see. Now this contents property will only work for this internal container here. So let's move it there, but it's not going to work if you don't define any heights. Okay, so let's put it here first and see how it behaves. You see it's not working now because the height is taking up the height is let me say is automatic. Okay, so but if we define a height that is longer than the content, let's say height that got up to here, now then you'll be able to see how this one works now, because this one is for horizontal alignments, while this one is for vertical alignments. Okay, but to see this one now, a height will need to be defined. So what is there is that inside this container here, I'll have to define a height here. Let's say h and put a value there like let's say 600 pixels. So if I put a height there, so you see now that I have 600 pixel height now. So now with this one now, I can move its content either to start, which is the default, okay, or to end, or to middle. I can even put it at the center. So you see it now. So this one work with the particular div here, okay, that is holding the actual column that we want. Okay, so all right, so that's how this one works now. It's for vertical alignments. Okay, now now the next one we have there is to align the individual grid items. You know, I said initially that the container is called a grid container. So this is a grid container, okay, and this is also a grid container, but these things here are the the grid items or the children. Now to align the children within their own sphere, we now use what is known as justified item. Okay, so I'm just going to say justify item start. Now inside of this place now, like this, now this is the content you're seeing now, okay, but there is a block here that this content stretches to occupy the entire space we have here. Okay, by default it's not so. Okay, also by default it stretches. Okay, but we can decide to say, okay, it should not stretch, it should just fill up the content that is there. So now what we can do there, we can just use this property here that says justify items. Okay, so now you can see the default one there is what justify items stretch, which is the default now. So now I'm going to change it from that. Now I'm going to say justify items instead of stretch. I'm going to use stats, justify items start now, and then you will see now, okay, so they are now at the beginning of their individual apportioned area. Okay, they are the start now. I can push them to the end. Okay, so that will now be justify items end. Okay, so I push them to the end, to the end of what the area that is allocated for them now. Okay, so they are not filling up the entire space that they have. But if I wanted to each of them to fill up their available space, now I'll have to use the default, which is what justify items stretch. Then they will stretch to fill up their individual spaces now. Okay, so this one is for the individual grid children, the grid items now. So that's how that one works. So it's to align the individual grid items. Okay, so this is vertical alignment, this horizontal alignment now. and for this is for the individual items now. Okay, now now we also have this justify self here. Let me bring this one close to here, I think, because these two work almost the same way now. So this justify items is going to like work on each of all the items now, whether start, end, or stretch now. But if there's a particular one now, align individual grid items. Okay, so if there's a particular one that I don't want to, maybe everything is stretched out now, but just a particular cell now, let's say this item 3 now, I want it to behave differently now, then I can use what this justify self, not longer justify items. Items will handle all of them, but self will handle just that one. So I'm going to use justify no longer items but self, let's say center, and that's one, only that one is going to behave differently from the rest now. So similarly I can have what end, and I can have stretch as well. Okay, so stretch, which is the default now, so it's good to remove it if you know you're going to be using stretch, because it's going to pick it up from what was defined here. Okay, so that is how it is. Okay, so that's it now. This item starts and self starts. Maybe as we go, I'll show you other usage of them. Okay, you might not see it now. All right, so now let's still proceed. Now another thing that we can do again, sometimes now you may, apart from, let's see, I think we specified 2 columns here. Let's see, let's go over here. Okay, now if you look at this thing now, we have 2 equal columns. Now if we make this one 3 now, it's going to be 3 equal columns. Okay, and sometimes let's remove that width. Let's remove that width and height so that we can have let's remove all these guys first for the now. What's happening there? Okay, let's see. Okay, excuse me. All right, so now remember we have all of this now. Now if you discover there are some layouts that you'll be designing now that they might not necessarily have equal width and height. Okay, for instance, now you can see this one now. Okay, so you might want to achieve something of this nature. Okay, so in this kind of case now, what do? We can actually use grid columns, and then we can specify the width for each of the columns. Okay, and that's what we have here. Okay, so we could specify it separating them with an underscore. We can also do the same thing for rows as well. So right here now, where we have 3 columns now, so we can now put this now and say the first one is going to be 150 pixels, and then the second one is going to be maybe 150 pixels also, and then the third one is going to be 400 pixels. Okay, so now when you come over here now, you're gonna see what we have like this. Okay, so that's it. Let's see. Okay, let's make this one 200, and the last one 500 pixels. Okay, so now you can see that we've specified this 3 now. That's how to actually go about it. Okay, so now the challenge now is that we want this last one now to occupy. So we've defined this one explicitly, defined this one now, what we can do is that this last one now, instead of putting 500 here, we could use min max. Okay, so it's right there also in the documentation. If you come here now, you could see under grid template columns now, you could see it min max now. Then in the bracket now, you put what you want to put there. So I can come here and I say min max. Then in a normal bracket, I can say I want instead of putting the 500 there, I can say 500 pixels, and then exactly the way it is now, like this now, comma underscore 1fr. So comma underscore 1fr. Okay, so that's now, it's not going to just put 500, but it's going to make 500 the minimum for me, like this. Okay, I think missed something there. Okay, I think I wrote mix max. So min max. Okay, so 150 500. So all right, so you could see it now. So I can increase this one again to 200. So you could see now the last one is going to take up the entire row. Okay, so and as usual, if you want to define responsiveness, then you could go ahead and then grid columns 200 200. So I can allow this one to take effect only from MD. Okay, but from the small screen now, I'm gonna use grid col1 as one column. Okay, so that's gonna take effect only when we expand. Okay, so that's responsive design going on there. Okay, or I could say on small screen SM, it should be maybe 2, and then okay, so I think this is a better flow for me. All right, so you see why I love grid, okay, for stuff like this now, for the overall layout. Right, so that's how to go about it now. I think I'm just going to add this now to the documents. Okay. All right, so you already know how to handle responsiveness. Just add the breakpoints, and then that's exactly what I've done so far. Okay. Now, when working with grid, sometimes you may want to do column span. It's quite easy. Just say column span, then how many columns you want to span. Same way you can also span rows as well. So right here now, let's take for instance now, let's open up this guy now. I can say, okay, this fifth one now is going to span 2. Okay, so so item 5 now, let's say item 5 now. So I can just say column span 2. Okay, I think it's going to push another items out. So you see, it's going to take 5 these 2 places now, thereby moving this whole item downward. Okay, so and that's it now. So that's span for you, and you can also span rows as well. So let's take for instance now, I can say, okay, this item 4 now should span 3 rows, 1 2 3. Okay, so in that case now I'll come over to item 4 now. I'm going to say row span 3. Okay, so item 4 is going to span 3 rows. So you see it now. So spanning here is just quite easy, so you could use it to achieve whatsoever you want to achieve. Okay, so that's how to span things now. So just in case you are working and then you feel the need to do some kind of column and row span like that, so you know how to go about it. Now I can span this one like this. Now just come over to this item that says span 2. This first one I can say span 3 if I want it to take up this entire space like this now. But you need to be careful about using spanning. Don't go ahead spanning everywhere, and then you can't create the entire layout using spanning. but rather you need to follow best practice by defining your exact rows and columns. So just on few occasions you just do spanning, okay, so that you don't go ahead and scattering your entire work. All right, so I think that is it now. So if you want to try your hand on some things now, let's get rid of okay, so let's just give an idea. Now if I'm to create this thing, there are actually different approach to creating some of these layouts anyway. Okay, so you could make everything to be just one grid, and then you go ahead and then dismantling parts of it into columns and all of those things. And again, you can also if you know that some things are just kind of disjointed, now they are not too closely knitted together, they are not too connected together, you could make them to stand on their own separate div. Like for instance, now this guy here over here now could be on its own. Let's just take this grid out of here first now for that guy. I think I should make this on a different video. Okay, let me stop this video and let's just say kind of review on some of them. Okay, so thank you and see you in the next class. Bye.